Welcome to this extended sit-down with Jackson County Administrator Danny Jordan. Danny, good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So you've been administrator now, I think you told me, since '06, Jackson County?
Yeah, August of 2006.
Okay, and in case anybody doesn't know, what is your role versus commissioners and how the county is run?
You know, to put it in simplified terms, using a sports analogy, I'm kind of like the quarterback and the commissioners are the coach.
Okay.
So they call the plays and I implement them, and they give me some leeway to be able to run audibles or, change the play if I see that it needs to be changed. But for the most part, they run the show. Okay,
and how many employees does the county have now?
Well, we're going through some changes
with
that. When I came, we had over 1,300 FTE in '06. In my tenure, we dropped all the way down to 800.
Wow.
We still today have less employees at the county than when I took over as county administrator. And we've been pushing back up towards the 1,100, 1,200 mark, mostly because of the healthcare expansion. So they're all positions that have been funded through outside sources, not within the county general fund.
And I want to ask you, we'll get into detail about specific things that have happened in recent months at the county, but
sure.
What has this past year been like for you professionally here at the county compared to your first, say, 10 years? How does it compare?
Well, I mean, every year has its challenges. This year certainly has been challenging. We've gone through a lot of growth with Health and Human Services. We've seen some really, I think, amazing projects get done. Since I've been here in 11 going on 12 years, we've actually built over $200 million in capital construction projects. And we've done that all without asking taxpayers to pass additional taxes to fund them. We've paid for them either through cash from our reserves or capital fund or through revenue bonding, which means that for example, the airport generates its own revenue to pay for its own debt. So that's a pretty big accomplishment over that period of time. This year we finished in the last year we finished our new Justice Court, which is out by Central Point. We finished our new District Attorney's Office and we built an RV park. So all of those are projects that I'm managing as part of my job. Overseeing a $350 million budget and all the various aspects of what the county does it takes a lot of work, and it's pretty intense at times to make sure that all the numbers work and match. At the same time, we've had some political issues and issues that have been public that we've gone through, and trying to manage through all of that while you're trying to do the work sometimes is difficult too.
You and I were talking before. It's not a personnel matter when it's an elected official. How do you juggle that versus what you can do versus what the public can do in trying to think of the best way to say it, discrepancies in the way you versus the elected official might want things to be run?
Well, so the way our county works, we're a home rule charter county, and this means the voters created our structure of government. The voters allowed in our home rule charter for the commissioners to hire a person to administer the functions of the county. They didn't authorize them to hire a person to handle either legislative or quasi-judicial issues. So I don't deal with those aspects that only elected officials, in our case the Board of Commissioners, deal with. Legislative meaning land use type decisions, or quasi-judicial meaning creating ordinances or laws of the county. I deal with the day-to-day operations. Essentially, I'm the chief executive officer of the county with regard to that. And by that, they delegate authority to me. So in other words, they're still responsible for it, but they give me certain limits to be able to do work. And I am responsible for the employees of the county. Elected officials technically are not employees. And I have no authority over elected officials. I do help elected officials prepare and present budgets. As the budget officer of the county, being the chief executive officer, I also serve as the budget officer. Personnel policies do apply to all departments within the county, so departments that elected officials run. But that's essentially the structural difference in what my authority is. And all of my authority really is just that. A lot of people say, well, the county administrator has a lot of power. There's a difference between power and authority, and anything that I'm able to do in the county is only because the commissioners have delegated or allowed me to do that.
Okay. One of the questions I wanted to get into was your relationship with former Sheriff Corey Falls. You guys knew each other for years, correct, before working together as he took the position of sheriff. Where did that relationship go sour?
Well, I don't really consider the relationship to go sour. I understand Corey Falls left and made the statements he made in his press conference, but I have a lot of respect for Sheriff Falls. I think he's accomplished a lot. I think I'm in a unique position to understand what he's accomplished in that I worked in a similar field as him. We both had a lot of similar training through the Oregon State Police Academy. I've been through there in my prior employment, being basic, intermediate, and advanced certified, and also supervisory, middle management, and executive certified. I didn't attend the FBI Academy, which is also a pretty significant accomplishment, I think, in his career. But I did attend the Oregon Executive Development Institute that's sponsored by the FBI and Oregon State Sheriff's Association. And of course, we both had similar backgrounds with having master's degrees in education. So I think I have a pretty good understanding of what he went through and, proud of his accomplishments. I would say that, he and I, we didn't hang out all the time, but we certainly were friends and spent time together. And in his role as sheriff and as my role as county administrator, we had some differences of opinions about things. And, but I don't consider those things to be causing a relationship to go sour. Clearly, he stated what he said, and I'm not going to try to understand his position from his perspective. I don't walk in his shoes every day, and I wish him well. I hope he does good things in his new job, and I think it's a great opportunity for him and for his family, and that's about it.
Okay. In response to a complaint from Sheriff Falls about the way he was treated, the county released what Commissioner Dyer called a, quote, preliminary report and conclusion that Sheriff Falls had not been discriminated against or harassed, end quote. Were you satisfied with that report?
Well, it's really not something I can comment on at this point, and I think I've explained that to you beforehand, that the county, with regard to the report and the comments that were made, the potential lies for litigation, and I'm unable to comment on that at this point. Okay,
maybe you can answer a separate question regarding the same topic. The reason I ask is because Sheriff Falls called it biased and one-sided, and he said he was told it would not be released. Why did the county release it?
As I just said, I really can't comment on that.
Okay. How would you describe your relationship with the new Sheriff, Nathan Stickler?
I think it's cordial. I consider him a colleague. I intend to do everything I can to support his transition into sheriff. And we've met multiple times and discussed changes that he'd like to make in the sheriff's office and things that he'd like to continue to do. I think I also support the concept of 21st century policing. A lot of people refer to that as Sheriff Falls policies, but really they're a federal policy that were a result of what happened in Ferguson, where President Obama put together a panel that met for 90 days, a panel of 7 people that met for 90 days, and they came out with a recommendation around improving relationships in policing, really kind of 6 pillars of that. And I think that they are progressive police practices, but I think that almost anywhere would benefit from implementing those 6 pillars of community, 21st century policing.
There's been some talk in the community that perhaps part of the problem between Sheriff Falls and the county was that he wasn't satisfied with his salary as sheriff. Has the county reached a financial agreement with Sheriff Stickler?
Well, the county doesn't reach a financial agreement. With regard to Sheriff Falls, as I said, I can't comment on that. Okay. But so the public understands, elected officials' salary is not set by me. It's really set by what's called the Elected Officials Salary Review Committee. Okay. It's a law in Oregon that this committee review certain criteria for determining what salary should be for all elected officials, not just for the sheriff, and that they set it once annually. So in the case that an elected office is vacated, the person that assumes the responsibility through being appointed or who would ultimately be elected assumes the position at the equivalent of step 1 in that position for all elected officials, and that's already been predetermined even before Sheriff Stickler was appointed. Okay.
The county recently laid off roughly 200 people in health and human services. You alluded to that big change earlier. Can you give us a little background on how we got here?
Yeah, let me correct something. The county actually hasn't laid anyone off.
Okay, please.
And I think the media kind of ran and focused on the fact that we had talked to employees saying how many employees could be impacted by what's occurring. We have had some employees leave since we announced that. Probably about 30 employees have already left our employ. And what that means is, if we get to the end of this process and it continues down the road that it's going, if everyone finds other employment and leaves, we won't lay anyone off.
Okay. So they were notified that that their job may not be here in several months' time. Would that be
there's
the
a
correct
potential.
way of putting it?
It was roughly 5 months' time. I mean,
Okay.
we're trying to give, understanding that this is affecting people's lives. I think we're required by our collective bargaining agreement to give 15 days notice or something like that. But we're trying to give people as much time as we possibly can because this affects them. But I am glad you asked the question.
Sure.
And I do want to say this issue, and I think you've reported on it, it's been in the paper, but essentially the county was a provider of non-crisis mental health services for 2 coordinated care organizations that serve citizens in Jackson County. That's Jackson Care Connect and All Care. The Jackson Care Connect had met with the county for about 14 months to implement a plan of transition from having the county be the primary care provider to moving to Columbia Care and Kairos. And then once the plan was implemented, it was roughly an 18-month transition plan. So there was a lot of planning that went into that. The county was aware of that. We had staffed accordingly. We really had expected to continue to be a provider for All Care. We did not see this coming. All Care essentially served us with a 90-day notice of contract termination for no cause. In other words, there wasn't anything we were doing wrong. In fact, we had received a lot of praise from both Jackson Care Connect and All Care for the services that we deliver. And then after serving us with the 90-day notice, wanted to discuss the potential for us to continue to be a service provider. Prior to that, we were essentially the administrator of the insurance and the service provider.
Okay.
And they essentially wanted to contract someone else for the administration, which was Options, as you reported, and then have Options contract with the county to be a provider. The media really reported on the 200 employees being the issue, and the costs and those types of things. Really what it comes down to is that we were being asked, and I'm simplifying this,
Sure.
This isn't exact, but we were being asked to provide the same level of service but increase our encounters 50%. In other words, do what you were doing, but do it at 150% of what you were doing. Do it for roughly 40% less. And there's some adjustments in there because they agreed to take over some things. As I said, I'm oversimplifying this. So basically take a 40% cut after you've been doing this for 3 years at this amount. Keep doing what you're doing, but do 150% of it. And then also we want you to maintain your community contractor panel. Now there were some things they were willing to take from that, some residential care that they were willing to take and fund, but this was a bigger problem than just the cost of 200 employees. It involved the 200 employees, but also doing more work and maintaining a service while taking a 40% cut. And it's just impossible for the county to do that. I mean, to some degree, as I said, it was unexpected that All Care was going to do this. The other thing is the county doesn't feel like it's appropriate that the county not be the provider. The county is going to continue to provide crisis mental health services. By statute, we are the community mental health provider. And so we'll still do care around crisis, step downs from the state hospital, and also civil commitment processes. Those are all really not just a matter of mental health or health and human services, they're also a matter of public safety. And that's the reason why the county is involved with this, because when it comes down to public safety, you can't compromise for cost necessarily.
Okay.
Now we have built over the last 3 years really an amazing infrastructure. We have brought in hundreds of employees from all over the country. And they came here expecting to be able to work within the vision of Jackson County.
You guys have been hiring for some time
for delivering services.
Yeah.
These are people that are highly skilled, they're highly qualified. It's amazing that we brought that pool of talent to Jackson County, and it was a lot of hard work. They aren't necessarily people who want to stay here and go to work for a nonprofit that doesn't have the same vision as Jackson County. And we have concerns that the nonprofits are going to be able to stand up and serve the number of clients that we're serving and have the facilities that we have to be able to serve them. We're concerned about our client safety. We're concerned about the fact that the clients could be subjected to this again. I mean, in this case, All Care, not continuing to contract with the county for services means they're going to use Options, but in a couple of years they could decide they want to use someone else. And when you take the clients that we deal with, these are among the most vulnerable in our community. Many of them, are very strict on medication and counseling protocols. And you subject them to that kind of change, it's extraordinarily stressful to their health, and it puts them at jeopardy and risk. And that's really where we're at right now with that issue. Is we want to make sure that if there is going to be a transition, and once again, we haven't agreed that we don't want to do the services. We've been put in a position to not be able to do them given the reduction in funding that we're being asked to take. But if there is going to be a transition, we don't think 90 days is suitable to transition. You know, we have roughly 1,050 clients that receive direct service from us, and almost 400 that receive services from our community panel. So roughly 1,500 people that really need, in our opinion, more than 90 days to transition.
Okay. What is Jackson County's relationship like with OnTrack? Is there a relationship there?
No. A couple years ago, the county used to serve as the fiduciary agent for the state and contract for indigent services and other services with OnTrack. At that time, the state would license the drug and alcohol providers, and the county didn't have any say over licensing. In the process of renewing licenses for OnTrack, there were some issues that arose that the county had no influence over, but we were being asked to continue contracting. And so I suggested that the county not serve as the fiduciary agent. So several years back, the county returned that responsibility to the state, so the state would contract directly with OnTrack. So we've been kind of out of any administration of services for OnTrack. We do have a couple of individual treatment contracts for community justice, for example, where OnTrack provides staff to come out to our facilities. And those are monitored outside of most of the issues that are going on with OnTrack. And those are a matter of us verifying compliance with our contracts, and if they weren't, we would terminate them. And so not really, there's not a huge impact to the county by what's going on with OnTrack, with the exception of, I will say this, OnTrack provides a huge infrastructure, and even if there are some flaws in it, it's important to our community that infrastructure be able to stand up and continue in some way, because there are a lot of people that depend on those services, and I would really hope that the community would rally behind repairing whatever the issues are and moving that program forward. In fact, I've offered that the county is willing to step in and help where we can to support and lift up systems because it's critical with the mass of people that have gone through that program. We have other providers as well that are just as critical to the infrastructure. Some that the county work with are ARC, which is also, ARC's a very good program and facility. But we would want all of those resources available at a level of service that's appropriate and that meets state requirements and state rules.
How would the county step in and aid the organization if necessary?
Well, there are things like, if you take foster placements that have been an issue for OnTrack. OnTrack is required to have inspections of their facilities, and they're required to pay for those inspections. And environmental health is an example. The county has an environmental health program, so we may be able to go in and evaluate safetiness and cleanliness and those types of things with regard to statutory or Oregon administrative rule requirements for OnTrack. And in fact, we've done some of that. We also have a pretty knowledgeable management structure at the county with regard to drug and alcohol requirements and mental health, especially where we have people with co-occurring disorders, both mental health and drug and alcohol issues. So we may be able to offer some guidance in policy development or management or budget, those types of things. Yeah. Okay.
So we've spent a lot of time looking back at the last year and what's happened in the last 6 months per se. What are you looking forward to? What does 2017 look like for Jackson County? What are you pointing at that, a feather in the cap for the county?
Well, most people probably won't think this, but you've heard, and a lot of people have heard, that the unfunded actuarial liability for PERS is pretty significant. We saw roughly a 4.19% increase in our payroll costs, $3+ million a year for the next 2 years, and then it's going to go up another $3+ million a year for 2 years, and then another $3+ million for 2 years. So we're looking at, roughly probably close to an $11 or $12 million increase over the next 6 years just in that unfunded actuarial liability. Our property tax base only goes up a little over $1 million a year. So we have more costs in just PERS increases than our entire property tax base can support. I mentioned earlier we have a roughly $350 million budget. About 10% of that comes from our property tax base. So it's not our local property tax payers that are paying the biggest portion of the cost for all the services the county delivers. But when you get hit with a large increase like that, typically local governments have to reduce services. That means layoffs or reduction in times we're open for people to be able to come in and get services. In our case, we've been planning to implement these increases, and we've reserved an operating revenue. So for the next 2 years, we're able to maintain services. I think that's a huge accomplishment for us. We're going to have to figure out over the next couple of years how to do that again. So we have some challenges in the budget, even though we're stable. We have a healthy reserve in our budget, and we are receiving an increase in property tax revenues basically because you see the housing market increasing and development increasing.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that recently. What about the Country Crossings Music Festival? I know that you talked about the RV park earlier. Is that something that's going to bring some pretty good revenue into the county?
Well, it's more of a partnership. It's really trying to provide something for our public. It's interesting. There are some things that we do that the public really enjoy having access to. And a lot of times local governments, when they get tight in budgets, they have to cut those things that are enjoyable. And the reason why is because they're not mandated.
Sure.
But we've made a really significant amount of progress with our fair and expo grounds over the last couple of years. We've got them in a healthy financial situation. They've done a great job managing it. Our fair board's done a great job. Our fair director has done a great job. And so having that healthy environment allows us to attract things like Country Crossings. This will be our first year. It's probably the biggest event we've ever held at our fairgrounds, a multi-day event like this. It's going to be probably quite a bit bigger than our fair, which is previously the biggest event. And we're really excited about it. I don't think it's going to bring a lot of revenue to the county. I think it'll bring a lot of revenue to businesses in the county, which I think is good for business and hotels and motels and stores and grocery stores and restaurants and taxis, and even we'll probably see an increase in air use because people can fly right in and be right out there at the fairgrounds. We have a great lineup. We hope people attend and make it successful so we can continue to have a good partnership with the Country Crossings Music Festival as we go forward.
All right, well, we covered a lot of ground. I appreciate you sitting down and talking with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, stay with us. We'll be right back.